Hey guys, tonight we're sinking into the damp cobblestones of ancient Rome, where the marble's cold, the sky's moody, and, oddly enough, turnips are whispering secrets about the weather. You stroll through a fog-draped alley near the Aventine Hill. There's a faint scent of roasted chestnuts and wet stone. A dog barks in the distance. Somewhere, a vendor shouts about fresh garum sauce. But your eyes drift down to a crooked wooden cart piled high with bulbous, earthy turnips. You're not buying soup ingredients tonight. You're trying to guess whether it'll rain tomorrow. Because, in ancient Rome, that was a thing. You probably won't survive this if you try it at your local farmer's market. But back then, people actually believed that turnips could help them predict weather. Just root vegetables getting a little too soft at the edges. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I mean, I'm whispering to you about tubers at 2 AM, so we're already in pretty niche territory. And let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is. I always love reading those. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk past a house with ivy curling over the doorway. Inside, a family is finishing their evening meal, lentils, fish paste, and a few slices of boiled turnip. The fire flickers. The father picks up the largest root from the center bowl and holds it to the lamplight. He mutters. Heavy skin. Warm night coming. You pause outside, pretending to adjust your sandal strap, but really, you're eavesdropping. Because this isn't the first time you've heard that phrase. Apparently, when a turnip's skin wrinkles just so, or when it releases a certain peppery tang, the family believes it means the air is shifting, maybe moisture is coming, maybe heat. Maybe Jupiter's having indigestion again. No one agrees, but everyone seems to trust the turnip more than the town crier. Historians still argue whether this practice was rooted in superstition or if it actually developed from real, observable patterns. After all, in a time before Doppler radar and 5-day forecasts, you needed something to go on, and vegetables were always lying around. You pass a bakery with its shutters closed and pause to press your hand against the still warm bricks. The heat pulses faintly into your palm, and it reminds you of how the earth itself stores memory. Roman farmers believed that turnips, grown in contact with the soil, could pick up subtle shifts in the land's energy. Or, more likely, they noticed the way certain crops would sprout, mold, or firm up depending on the weather. One slightly bizarre fact: some Romans would slice a turnip in half and leave it overnight on the roof. In the morning, they'd check for condensation inside the flesh. If it sweated like a panicked bureaucrat before tax season, they'd say, storm's coming. If it stayed dry, maybe it was safe to hang laundry or plan a picnic in the forum. A gentle breeze rolls down the alley. It smells of laurel and wood smoke. Somewhere behind a curtain, someone sneezes, and now you're wondering if it's pollen season. Would the turnips know? There's a little fountain at the street corner, shaped like a lion's mouth, burbling lazily into a cracked marble basin. You sit on the edge, letting the water's rhythm blend with your slowing breath. A boy with a basket of vegetables walks past. His turnips are flecked with clumps of earth, and he's humming something in Greek. Probably a market chant. Or maybe it's just a song about rain. What's strange is how accepted all this is. Romans don't laugh about it. It's not a joke. It's not a TikTok trend. Farmers, priests, even some minor officials kept weather journals, not of the sky, but of how vegetables behaved. Did the leaves curl inward before the wind changed? Did the root taste sharper before thunder? One old scroll fragment suggests that during the early Republic, farmers in Latium were already planting turnips as both food and forecast. According to the fragment, if the roots grow shallow and lean east, prepare thy barrels and cover the hay. No one's really sure what that means, or if it's metaphorical, but the implication was clear: direction and shape told a story. You remember now a phrase an old Roman matron once whispered to her granddaughter on a stormy morning: the roots speak when the sky sulks. It's poetic. It's weird. It's deeply Roman. You start walking again, crossing a worn patch of mosaic that glimmers like fish scales under the moonlight. Somewhere off in the hills, thunder growls, low and long, like a sleepy lion stretching its paws across the Apennines. Maybe the turnip was right after all. You pass a stone bench where a merchant has laid out his unsold vegetables. There's a tiny oil lamp flickering beside them. You squat down to take a closer look. No one's watching. The turnips glisten faintly, their skins taut but slightly pocked. You prod one with a cautious finger. Soft on one side. Is that good? Is that bad? You don't know. But the air does feel heavier. Damper. The kind of heaviness that clings to the collar of your tunic, even though you're still wearing your "it's never going to rain" sandals. You wonder if there's a chart. A kind of Roman vegetable index. Like, soft, warm, and earthy. Thunderstorm. Crisp, cool, and spicy. Dry spell. Sprouting eyes and funky smell. Prey to Mercury and cancel travel plans. The stars overhead glimmer faintly through a hazy curtain of cloud. One of them blinks out, no fanfare, just quietly gone. You sit back against the base of a column and watch the night darken around you. The air is rich with possibility, and your lap feels warm from the heat the stone has stored all day. Turnips and weather. It sounds ridiculous. But here, right now, in this sleepy slice of the empire, it also makes perfect sense. And in the soft hush of the Roman night, as the wind finally turns, you swear you can smell the rain, and maybe, just maybe, the turnip saw it coming first. You've left the sleepy alley behind, sandals brushing against packed dirt as you walk toward the edge of the city, where the smoke thins, the domus mansions fade into orchard patches, and gardens stretch out like open-air diaries of the weather. You duck under a tangled vine of grapes and step into a small villa's backyard plot, carefully maintained by a household slave who probably knows more about climate than any imperial advisor. Here, under the hum of early crickets and the musky perfume of disturbed soil, you crouch next to a row of squat little turnip plants. Their leafy greens sway lazily in the breeze. A terracotta pot nearby catches the runoff from a cracked aqueduct spout, its surface shivering slightly with wind. The sun's barely a whisper behind the clouds, but even now, there's a ritual unfolding. A man, shirt loosened, feet bare, brow glistening, kneels beside the garden bed, running thick, sun-stained fingers along the leaves. He pinches a stem and leans in, sniffing as though deciphering an ancient code. "Mild scent," he mutters, then turns to you with a grin that says, "I've seen things. Probably rain by third hour tomorrow." And you nod, because who could possibly question such confident nose-based meteorology? This is where agriculture meets astrology, but with roots instead of stars. Romans didn't always stare upward to seek meaning. Sometimes, they looked down. The soil had texture, the crops had mood swings, and if the leaves were curling too tightly or the stems had an odd fuzz, that was your forecast. It wasn't all about augurs and birds. Sometimes the vegetables were enough. One strange but oddly charming practice in rural communities involved whispering to the sprout. New gardeners, often children or younger laborers, would talk softly to freshly emerging shoots, asking them what they could see in the days ahead. Were they growing quickly, thirstily, confidently, or did they tremble and hang low in the mornings? There was a belief that plants felt the coming atmosphere and responded accordingly. Of course, scholars still argue whether this was just harmless agricultural poetry or whether these practices actually influenced planting schedules across Italy. Some claim farmers followed elaborate seasonal vegetable behavior charts, while others believe most of this came down to personal superstition mixed with a love for hearing oneself talk to a root. Nearby, a clay tablet leans against a basket of tools. Scratched in rough Latin are notes from what looks like a household steward: lunaxiv, turnip skin waxy, cabbage split, east wind late, warm morning, cloudy end, no fire until noon. That's not a grocery list. That's a weather diary. You run your hand across the inscription, noting how even the smallest detail, the surface texture of the vegetable, was worthy of record. A blackbird trills from a nearby olive tree, and your eyes drift to a row of leeks planted beside the turnips. You wouldn't think leeks could do anything besides taste like wet grass in soup, but Romans considered them atmospheric indicators, too. If the outer layers curled open suddenly after sunrise, it meant humidity. If they stayed tight and green, the day would likely stay crisp. Meanwhile, under the soil, the turnips did their own cryptic thing. Roman gardeners sometimes dug shallow inspection holes around the root zone, looking for signs of premature rot, warmth, or bugs surfacing earlier than expected. The maggots rise with the dew, one farmer once said, probably too casually. You wander toward the edge of the plot, where a low wall crumbles in the warm dusk. Beyond it, more fields stretch out toward a pine-shaded horizon. A cluster of labourers walks past with baskets, singing something rhythmic and low. Their steps match the pace of the wind. Their arms are full of beans, radishes, and, you guessed it, turnips. You hop down from the wall and join their pace, trailing behind like a ghost. No one minds. In this dreamscape, you're just another sleepy observer. One of the older workers speaks up, addressing a younger man fumbling with his load. Did you feel the turnip tops at dawn? Why yes, the younger replies, breathlessly. They were twitchy. Twitch is no good, the old man says. Means heat lightning or a false wind. Cover the wine jugs. You almost laugh. Twitchy turnips mean wind? But then again, have you ever stared at a vegetable and just known something was wrong? Here's your quirky fringe tidbit. Some Roman households actually built small shrines in their gardens to Domina Ridicula, a made-up little goddess of roots and sprouts. She was never officially canonized in Roman religion, but there's graffiti in Pompeii referencing her. One tile reads, "Ridicula, shield us from soggy shoes and sunburnt necks." So, yeah, people were serious about their weather, even if they made up weird mascots to blame for it. You reach the villa's far boundary and find a wooden fence tied together with hemp rope and good intentions. A few dried leaves cling to it like the last gossip of autumn. You lean against the beam, looking back over the garden. Everything here feels intentional. Every root tells a story. Every stem holds a whisper of what might come. And in this second-person dreamscape you're walking through, the line between observation and belief is blurred just enough to let you fall into it, head first and slow. The real question scholars debate isn't whether this was done, but whether it worked. Did turnips really absorb enough atmospheric change to give clues? Or were people simply building meaning out of coincidence, convincing themselves that a bulbous plant could speak the language of clouds? There's one theory that suggests farmers learned to associate certain environmental conditions with both vegetable behavior and weather patterns, forming a kind of subconscious weather wisdom. Not magic. Not nonsense. Just generations of accumulated, gut-level knowledge, packaged in a vegetable. You feel the first brush of night's chill on your arm. The garden is still. The turnips, now dark silhouettes against the tilled earth, don't look prophetic anymore. They just look like dinner. But somehow, your body still feels the hush of expectation. Like they're about to say something. And you almost ask them. You almost lean forward, brush the soil, and whisper, "Rain tomorrow." But the wind answers first, soft and certain. You're walking again, further from the villa gardens now, toward the outskirts where the houses thin and the air smells faintly of smoke and overripe olives. A cart creaks somewhere nearby, and a donkey snorts like it's in on the joke you haven't heard yet. Because tonight, you're about to wander into the weirdest intersection of cuisine and climate Rome ever invented. Food as forecast. Specifically, the idea that whatever was sitting in your pantry could double as tomorrow's weather report. You duck into a shaded storage room, the kind that stays damp year-round, stacked with clay amphorae, coiled ropes of garlic, and baskets of onions, leeks, and, of course, turnips. The air is thick with fermentation and a quiet kind of purpose. This isn't just a storeroom. It's a weather station. At least, if you believe what some Romans did. The woman in charge of the kitchen glides in behind you. Her sandals slap softly against the flagstone floor. She moves to one of the baskets, lifts a turnip, and pinches its top with narrowed eyes. "Mushy," she mutters. "Again. That means we'll get hot fog by sunrise. My bones were already warning me." You raise an eyebrow, though she doesn't see it. "My shirut equals fog." Got it. This wasn't a unique superstition. In kitchens all over the empire, cooks developed folk systems of observation, food-based indicators that forecasted the weather. Not just turnips. They monitored how quickly lentils boiled, how pickled eggs clouded over, how cabbage leaves wilted after sundown. These tiny, everyday clues formed an informal but widely shared weather lexicon. Some of it made sense. A humid day might speed up spoilage or softening. But then you hit the truly weird stuff. Like this gem, if the bread crust cracks before cooling, expect lightning. Or, if your wine smells sweeter than usual in the jug, stay indoors until noon. Historians still argue whether this was genuine observational wisdom or the culinary equivalent of ancient horoscopes. Did these households really believe the stew could sense the sky? Or were they just killing time while the porridge simmered? One preserved scroll, found in a garbage heap outside Herculaneum, details something called the garum cycle. It claimed that the famous fermented fish sauce changed odor patterns according to humidity and could be used to forecast storms. Let that sink in. Imagine sniffing fish sauce to know whether you should pack an umbrella. That's dedication. Or desperation. But let's get back to the turnips. They were especially valued for being honest. That's how one cook described them, honest. If a turnip spoiled early, she said, the weather was lying in its throat. Whatever that means. You trail your hand along a shelf cluttered with odds and ends, bronze ladles, a spice grinder, a small idol of Vesta with smoke-darkened features. In a corner, a clay bowl holds yesterday's soup scraps, including what looks like a discarded turnip top curling in on itself like a warning. There was a trick some Roman cooks used. They'd slice the turnip into thin rounds and leave them overnight on an open shelf. If the disc stayed dry and white, it meant a dry breeze from the north. If they grew spots, expect humidity. And if they curled into tight, darkened spirals, well, don't plan your toga laundry for tomorrow. Meanwhile, food markets buzzed with gossip just as meteorologically suspicious. One vendor in the Subura district was infamous for predicting heat waves based on how many flies landed on his radishes. His stall bore a crude sign that read, 2 flies or fewer equals good day. 4 or more equals sweaty tunics. You walk through a narrow alley now, led by torchlight, where more homes glow from within. From the windows, you catch flashes of everyday rituals. An old man sniffing a bowl of chickpeas like he's trying to read them. A girl pressing her hand to a wine jar and nodding solemnly, as if the temperature of clay could chart thunder. A fringe tale even claims that Emperor Claudius once delayed a garden banquet when his chef noticed the root vegetables felt overly warm. The dinner was rescheduled, and, sure enough, a storm rolled in that evening. Whether Claudius believed the roots, the chef, or just didn't want to eat soggy figs is unknown. You lean on a brick wall near the communal ovens. A young baker steps outside, apron dusty, holding a half-burned loaf. He sniffs the bread, frowns, and mutters to himself, "North wind baked this too quick. Fire's got a jumpy soul today." Then he tosses the loaf aside like a ruined prophecy and disappears back inside. There's something endearing in it all. The idea that food, our most immediate connection to the world, could talk back to us about the elements. That a turnip's firmness, a cabbage droop, or the pacing of bread crust could give us early warning. It's equal parts charming, practical, and ridiculous. Just like Rome itself. Scholars try to piece together how widespread these beliefs really were. Did all households do this? Was it just a lower-class superstition? Some argue that wealthier Romans preferred augurs and calendar math over talking to their groceries, while others suggest that even patricians peeked at their produce when no one was looking. After all, a consul might not trust the forum gossip, but he'd definitely trust his cook, and if the cook said the turnips were acting strange, well, maybe it wasn't the day to go boating. You reach the edge of the district now, where houses give way to open air and the smell of nighttime trees. The moon slips free of the clouds for a moment, silvering the fields ahead. Somewhere, a wolf howls, way too dramatic, frankly, but you let it pass. You're still thinking about that cracked bread loaf, that suspiciously warm turnip, and the idea that someone once paused a war march because their leek was acting standoffish. You exhale and let your shoulders soften. Maybe tomorrow it'll rain. Maybe it'll be dry. But tonight, you trust the kitchen. And the kitchen trusts the turnip. The fields sprawl wider now, and your steps carry you toward a Roman encampment at the edge of a sleepy, half-cultivated valley. You can hear the low murmur of soldiers talking by firelight, cooking something vaguely stew-shaped in dented pots. The stars are smudged by thin clouds, and the air is heavy with ash and whatever's left of lunch, barley, onions, a hint of goat. You slide past a half-awake sentry and make your way toward a tent that smells like leather, iron, and socks. So basically, the Roman military's signature fragrance. Inside, a centurion is hunched over a crude map drawn in charcoal on goat hide. His muttering about visibility, mud levels, and the condition of his men's boots. But when one of the junior officers enters, his report has nothing to do with troop morale or enemy movement. "Sir, the turnips came up dark again." The centurion groans like he's been punched. "Damn it. That's the third time this month. Delay the scouts till mid-morning. I'm not losing more mules in a swamp." Welcome to the Tactical Route Forecast, Rome's unofficial military meteorology. You wouldn't think the army, that well-oiled monster of conquest and sandals, would ever listen to a vegetable. And yet, out here in the mud and open skies, superstition starts to look a lot like survival. If a field was dry enough to plough but too sticky to cross with wagons, the turnips knew it first. At least, that's what some soldiers insisted. They didn't exactly publish weather reports. But military camps had their own folklore, passed between mess tents, whispered over dice games, and scribbled in the margins of duty rosters. Stories about turnips that refused to boil, or those that split too easily with a dull blade. Each of these quirks, they claimed, warned of things like thunder, swamp fog, or even angry mornings, a phrase no one ever quite defined. One preserved military log from a frontier camp in Dacia includes the following gem. Day 12, turnips foamed when roasted. Fog thick as goat's milk. Scouts tripped on slope stones. Horse broke leg. Tiberius blamed root. Tiberius whipped. Historians still argue whether this was poetic grumbling or an actual attempt at field data. Some suggest soldiers tracked vegetable behavior the way we track cloud formations. Others claim these were just jokes that became doctrine over time. But in a world without radar or Doppler forecasts, you trusted whatever gave you a head start, even if it was a route. Out in these forward camps, where supply lines thinned and weather could snap from sunny to catastrophic in hours, a soldier's life could hinge on how fast the mud hardened or whether frost would bite before dawn. If the camp cook noticed turnips taking longer to roast, or if boiled ones came out blotchy instead of clean white, it might be enough to delay a march or reroute a convoy. A centurion's gut instinct was valuable. But a centurion with weird vegetables? Practically a prophet. You wander past a group of soldiers lounging near a fire. One is poking a turnip slice on a skewer, watching it blacken. "Looks angry," he says. "Stormy angry or cursed angry." "Could go either way," another mutters. "I don't trust the skins when they bubble." They all nod solemnly. Not a single laugh. Just roasted root divination taken as dead serious as sword technique. It's equal parts hilarious and weirdly practical. The fringe part? Some detachments carried what they called testi tempostatis, weather pots. Clay bowls designed for boiling turnips in specific ways, to observe how the surface changed. If they foamed too fast or too high, or discolored in odd patches, it was seen as a bad omen for marching or sailing. Some units even had a designated route watcher, usually a board auxiliary or kitchen helper who secretly enjoyed the power. Not officially, of course. No legionnaire was going to write awaiting route boil results in a battle log. But in the pauses between orders and bloodshed, even the hardest soldier might sneak a peek at the stew and wonder if the bubbles had meaning. You follow the worn trail between tents to a side shelter where a healer is tending to a man with a twisted ankle. On a bench nearby, a tub of herbs sits beside, yes, a pile of chopped turnips. The healer doesn't look up. "Cold nights make the roots lie," she says, slicing one clean in half. "They don't swell right. Tell your commander not to trust them till sunrise." And just like that, another layer is added to the turnip's resume: unreliable narrator when frost is near. By the late Republic, some commanders even issued informal weather routines to the camp cooks. Note the steam color, the weight of the raw root, how fast the knife passes through. It was a kind of data collection, minus the charts. One theory holds that these daily checks informed minor tactical decisions, whether to pack heavier cloaks, delay cavalry movement, or break camp earlier. Of course, some scholars scoff. They argue there's no real botanical reason for turnips to respond so precisely to humidity or temperature changes. But others say that's the point. It wasn't about science. It was about rhythm. When you spend weeks marching in unpredictable terrain, you crave anything steady. And turnips, for all their squishiness, at least gave you something to interpret. The night air sharpens. A bell rings somewhere in the dark, signaling a change of watch. Soldiers yawn and shuffle, wrapping cloaks tighter around their shoulders. One last turnip slice is held up to the fire. Its skin splits with a soft hiss. Definitely rain, someone murmurs. You step out from under the tent flap and feel the wind shift across your cheek. Maybe it's suggestion. Maybe it's just the time of year. But you wouldn't bet against that soldier. Not tonight. Not with a route like that. The wind carries you away from the camp, down a long road lined with whispering pines and time-smoothed milestones. Your sandals crunch faintly over gravel, and overhead, the sky is more ink than velvet now, thick with the feeling of something about to happen. Not a storm, necessarily. Just the kind of silence that makes you notice your heartbeat and wonder what the clouds are thinking. You pass a roadside shrine, tucked beside a crumbling wall. A votive candle flickers inside, casting jittery light on a clay figurine of Mercury. A humble offering sits beneath it, a small bundle of grain, and, yep, a turnip. Slightly wilted. Clearly not left for lunch. In the countryside, far from the humming heart of Rome, the relationship with weather was more intimate. Farmers didn't just glance at the sky, they measured time, hope, and livelihood by it. And so, turnips weren't just food or folklore. They were barometers of the earth's mood, predictors of frost and storm and famine. Sometimes, scapegoats for everything. You duck under a fig tree, its fruit not yet ripe, and follow the scent of manure and old hay. A farmhouse comes into view, mud brick, thatched roof, small corral off to the side. Inside, a woman hovers over a low table, sorting dried herbs into jars. A young boy kneels nearby, carefully placing turnip slices into rows on the windowsill. You pause in the doorway, watching. He's labeling them, north wall, shade side, sun side, scratched into tiny wood pieces beside each slice. His mother glances at you and nods toward the setup. He's watching how they curl, she says softly. You can tell when the winds are turning if the east-facing ones twist first. You squint. They really are curling differently. Farmers like her didn't have marble baths or weather temples. They had turnips. They had muscle memory and gut instinct. They had charts etched in fence posts and patterns passed down like lullabies. The state religion might promise Jupiter's thunder and Ceres' bounty, but here, it was the turnip that whispered real omens. One of the most common rural beliefs. If a turnip harvested under a full moon stayed white through sunrise, you'd have a good planting season. But if it yellowed overnight, watch out. Pestilence. Or blight. Or, at the very least, an extremely annoying summer. Historians still argue whether these signs actually had predictive value or were just rustic rituals born of desperation. But even elite agricultural manuals mention odd root behaviors. One fragment from a lost treatise attributed to Lucius Columella, yes, that Columella, Rome's agricultural know-it-all, mentions boiling turnips before equinoxes to test air pressure, claiming the bubbles changed when storms approached. Fringe? Probably. But hey, the man had vineyards across Hispania. Maybe he knew something we don't. You follow the mother outside as she walks to the garden. Her breath clouds faintly in the night chill. She pauses near a low, tilled patch and digs lightly in the soil with a stick. Turnips again, only these are tiny, new shoots. Too early, she mutters. But they beg to be planted. She looks at you, half smiling. If they bloom fast, we'll have dry weeks. If they sit sulking like spoiled nobles, storms. The word storms seems to echo a little, even though she says it softly. In the distance, a dog barks twice. Then silence again. Here in the fields, people believed weather was woven into everything, dreams, milk production, when hens laid eggs, and yes, the personality of your vegetables. They'd even pass down stories of moody turnip years, when nothing grew quite right, the wine turned acidic, and everybody got sick of boiled roots by mid-March. You've probably never thought of a turnip as having moods before, but in Roman country law, they definitely did. There were sullen roots, nervous ones, and chattering ones. Only content turnips were considered safe to eat and trust. You step into the barn now, where a lantern swings lazily from a beam. There's a row of baskets along the back wall, and in each one, a bundle of turnips rests. Some are swaddled in straw. Others lie bare. One has been painted with a crude face, smiling. The farmer chuckles when she sees you notice it. That one's our lucky root. 4 years old now. Started as a joke, but the last time we threw him out, we lost half the grain to mildew. Brought him back. Rain stopped 2 days later. Coincidence? She shrugs. Maybe. But his staying. You don't argue. The longer you spend here, the more you start to see the pattern, not in the sky, but in the behavior around it. The turnip wasn't trusted because it was magical. It was trusted because it never argued. It didn't lie. It changed in small ways that people could watch. Something to hold on to when thunder rattled the earth and temples felt very far away. You linger a while longer near the fire pit, warming your hands. The boy comes out again, now carrying a small wax tablet. His scribbling notes beside each curl pattern from earlier. It's turning southerly, he says with a surprising confidence. Grandfather says that makes the bees stupid and the cows jumpy. You nod. Of course it does. Bees. Cows. Curling root discs. Perfect sense. There's a comfort here, isn't there? Not in perfect predictions, but in observation. In the act of watching and believing, even a little, that nature sends you messages if you're patient enough to listen. The modern mind wants data. The ancient one wanted dialogue. And somehow, the turnip offered both. As the fire crackles low and the stars blink into view one by one, you stretch your limbs and lean back against a hay bale. Somewhere nearby, water drips steadily into a basin. The wind is soft again, carrying the faintest smell of soil and cold root. Tomorrow might bring rain. Or shine. But tonight, you believe in the boy's notes and the lucky painted turnip and the silence that follows trust. Dawn comes slow and smoky as you head back toward civilization, your path winding past vineyards crusted with dew and sheep that seem to resent mornings as much as you do. The sky stretches grey, as if someone forgot to finish painting it, and the first light feels less like sunshine and more like a suggestion. You crest a hill and there it is, Rome. Not the postcard version, but a softer, quieter face of the city. Morning merchants yawning into clay cups, laundry lines sagging under tunics. Distant clatter of hooves over stone. You veer off the main road and into the forum, still mostly empty except for a pair of insomniac philosophers bickering gently beside a statue of Minerva. One of them is waving a turnip in the air for emphasis. Of course he is. You ease into a seat on a worn marble bench and listen in. The tuba is a mirror, the man says, eyes wild with the confidence of someone who once read half of Aristotle's grocery list and decided he could improve it. It absorbs not just nutrients, but ambient influence, weather, mood, planetary vibration. His companion rolls his eyes. You said that last week about cheese. I was right about cheese. This is your cue to lean back, close your eyes, and bask in the chaos of elite Roman weather theories. Because while farmers and soldiers were using turnips like squishy, edible weather vanes, the intellectuals, they were doing it with style, charts, philosophy, even a few very dramatic poems. The Stoics, for example, loved the idea that vegetables could serve as indicators of the world's logos, the divine rational order of things. A turnip that failed to sprout was not just disappointing. It was a sign, a philosophical moment. A failure of harmony between man and universe. Probably your fault, too. You pass a group of students gathered in an open portico, listening to a silver-haired man lecture about seasonal metaphysics. He's balancing a turnip on a bronze tray, using it to demonstrate spatial yielding in response to divine humidity. His toga is spotless. The turnip is not. And it gets weirder. In some private academies, wealthy patrons funded root gardens specifically for elemental sensitivity research. That's a fancy way of saying they planted rows of turnips at different angles to see which ones acted weird when Jupiter was in retrograde, which, according to one surviving scroll, caused extreme swelling and unpredictable slicing resistance. Historians still argue whether any of this was serious science or just rich people being delightfully unhinged with too much time and property. Honestly, it's probably both. You can imagine the dinner party. So how's the villa in Capua, Gaius? Lovely. The coastal turnips have begun reacting to solar inversion. Splendid. Mine keeps sweating under moonlight. And yes, turnip sweat was a thing. Elite weather watchers often noted tuber moisture release as an omen. If your stored turnips wept during a clear evening, it was said to signal an incoming sirocco wind, hot, dry, and deeply annoying. These roots weren't just getting clammy. They were allegedly communicating atmospheric instability. Very classy. Very damp. By the time of Augustus, upper-class Romans began mixing agricultural superstition with astrology, creating a kind of gourmet cosmology. One letter from a Roman matron named Flavia tells her daughter to delay her wedding because the lunar tides have discolored our soup turnips. You can almost hear her sniffing as she wrote it. At this point, you may be wondering, was there any actual evidence? Did turnips really change with the weather? Well, yes, sort of. All root vegetables, including turnips, are sensitive to temperature and humidity. Their texture shifts subtly. Their skins may wrinkle or expand depending on moisture in the air. They spoil faster or slower based on barometric pressure, even if no one had a word for that yet. So while the scholars were probably overthinking it, their data wasn't totally fiction. Back in the forum, a vendor unloads crates from a mule cart. One tips over, spilling a cascade of knobby white turnips across the cobblestones. He sighs, mutters something about Juno's backside, and begins collecting them. You help him gather a few, and he grins, offering you one as thanks. Keep it by your window, he says. If it turns purple, close the shutters. Hail's coming. You nod solemnly. No point arguing with thousands of years of tuber wisdom. Across town, in the atrium of a senator's villa, a group of upper-crust ladies sip watered wine and play a weather game. One holds up 2 turnips, one small and dry, one soft and round. She turns to her guests. Storm or fog? She asks. The others wrinkle their brows, tilt their heads, squint dramatically. Fog, says one, but the kind that ruins silk. There's laughter, but no one says it's silly. Because beneath the games, the toga jokes, and the pseudo-academia, lies a real truth, Romans respected patterns. Repetition. The comfort of believing that something as simple as a root could hint at what tomorrow holds. And besides, it's not like their alternatives were more reliable. Sacrificing chickens for answers? Gazing into animal livers? Reading smoke trails while standing on one foot? Honestly, consulting a sweaty turnip seems refreshingly sane by comparison. You wander past the theatre, where comedic play is being advertised, the oracles of onion and turnip. 2 vegetables fall in love. One of them predicts floods. Classic slapstick. The tagline, their peels conceal the truth. It was probably awful, but it sold out for weeks. By now, the sun has risen properly. The city hums louder. Carts clatter. Children shout. And yet, you notice something odd. More than one windowsill, more than one shop counter, features a solitary turnip in a small bowl. Watching. Absorbing. Waiting for its moment. You run your thumb over the one you still carry. It's cool and dry. Neutral. No sweating. No foaming. No curses. A quiet little talisman. Maybe it won't tell you what the weather will be, but it does remind you that even the most mundane object, if watched with curiosity, can offer a thread of order in the chaos of clouds and time. The streets pulse with midday energy, and you find yourself drifting toward the marketplace, where vendors shout their wares and the smell of fresh bread mingles with the sharp tang of olives. You pass a stall that's entirely dedicated to root vegetables, a curious rarity. Baskets of onions, garlic, carrots, and, of course, turnips, piled in precarious mounds, each one seeming to glow faintly in the sun. You stop, drawn by a wizened old man polishing a turnip with a rag that looks as ancient as the man himself. His eyes sparkle with a mischievous glint that suggests he knows secrets no official text will ever reveal. "Ah, traveler," he croaks. "You're looking for signs, aren't you? The kind that only a turnip can tell." You nod, though you aren't quite sure what he means. He leans in conspiratorially. Most people think weather prediction is the work of gods, or the flight of birds. But here, in the folds of the earth, the humble turnip holds truth. He tells you stories of farmers who swear their crops flourished after listening to the roots, of sailors who delayed voyages after noticing how their turnips behaved. Some believed that when turnips exuded a sticky sap, storms were imminent. Others claimed that roots with a bitter taste foretold drought. You lean closer, half expecting the old man to produce a crystal ball. Instead, he pulls from his pocket a tiny, hand-carved wooden turnip, an amulet, passed down through generations of root watchers. Some things, he says softly, are beyond logic. The turnip doesn't just predict weather, it reflects the soul of the land. This fringe belief, that turnips could be spiritual conduits, flourished in rural cults and mystery religions. Followers performed rituals around harvest time, offering the best roots to local deities, hoping to secure favor for rain or sun. Historians still debate whether these practices were symbolic or taken literally by the common folk. Was the turnip merely a stand-in for more complex agricultural rites? Or did ancient Romans genuinely believe that the root was a living oracle? You consider the idea as you walk on, passing by an old aqueduct, where moss clings to stones like faded memories. Nearby, children play a game with a turnip and a stick, their laughter ringing clear and bright. The turnip is tossed, caught, and occasionally dropped, but always cherished. It's a reminder that, no matter how serious the weather predictions or mystical associations, turnips were part of daily life, mundane and magical all at once. As the afternoon sun sinks lower, casting long shadows over the city, you catch a glimpse of a fresco depicting a Roman farmer offering turnips to Ceres, the goddess of grain and fertility. The image is faded, but the reverence is unmistakable. The turnip's role, it seems, was never just about weather. It was about connection between people, land, and the divine forces they sought to understand. You pause, feeling the weight of centuries pressing gently on your shoulders, and realize that in the quiet, unassuming turnip lies a story of humanity's enduring quest to read the world's subtle signals. The evening air wraps around you like a soft blanket as you stroll along the Tiber's edge, the water shimmering faintly beneath a sky now brushed with twilight hues. The chatter of the city softens, replaced by the occasional splash of a fishing net or the distant clang of a blacksmith finishing his day's work. The turnip in your satchel feels heavier now, as if it too senses the shift in light and mood. You pause by a wooden bridge, where a group of fishermen are cleaning their catch. One of them notices your curious gaze and beckons you over, wiping his hands on a rough cloth. He doesn't speak much, but when you mention turnips and weather, his eyes brighten. "We watch the roots," he says simply, "like we watch the tides. When the turnips crack before the harvest, the river will rise. When they stay firm, the fish stay deep." It's a practical knowledge, passed down not in dusty books but in stories told under stars, beside flickering fires. Weather prediction here isn't about grand theories, it's about survival. And the humble turnip is a trusted ally. You lean against the railing, watching the fishermen work. Their hands are calloused, their movements precise. The river is calm now, but they know better than to trust calm forever. Back in the city, the religious festivals are beginning to stir. The cult of Ceres prepares for the annual rites, and turnips, once again, take center stage. They are offered at altars, woven into garlands, and sometimes even carved into figures that parade through the streets. The rituals blend agriculture with spirituality, a reminder that weather and fate were often seen as one and the same. One peculiar festival involves placing turnips outside doorways at night to catch dreams of the coming season. It sounds like superstition, but it's a practice rooted in the belief that the vegetable can absorb not just moisture but omens. Historians still debate whether such customs were widespread or confined to isolated communities. Some suggest that the rituals served more as social glue than as genuine weather forecasting tools. Others argue they reveal a deep human desire to find meaning in the unpredictable. As darkness falls, you find yourself wandering toward a small temple dedicated to Flora, goddess of flowers and spring. Inside, the scent of incense mingles with the earthy aroma of fresh herbs and, yes, turnips. The priests here speak of the vegetable as a symbol of renewal, hardy, nourishing, and surprisingly versatile. You close your eyes and breathe it in, feeling the layers of ancient belief settle around you like dust on old pages. The turnip, in its quiet way, connects farmers and priests, scholars and fishermen, past and present. It's more than a root. It's a thread woven through the fabric of Roman life, a symbol of hope, resilience, and the eternal human quest to predict what lies beyond the horizon. You tuck the wooden amulet back into your satchel and continue your walk, the sounds of the city fading into the night as stars begin their silent vigil. Night deepens as you make your way through narrow alleyways where shadows dance softly in the glow of oil lamps. The scent of baked bread mingles with faint smoke from cooking fires, wrapping the city in a cozy embrace despite the chill settling in. You pull your cloak tighter and press onward, the turnip's quiet weight against your side a steady companion. You find yourself near the Subura, Rome's bustling, noisy quarter, far from the polished marble of the Forum but alive with an energy all its own. Here, the wisdom of weather and turnips takes on a more practical, streetwise tone. The common folk rely less on philosophy and more on observation, gossip, and maybe a pinch of superstition. In a smoky tavern, a group of laborious swap stories over thick wine. One claims his turnips sweat like a wet dog before a thunderstorm. Another insists that when the roots grow oddly knotted, it means the harvest will be poor and the bread scarce. You listen, amused, as they debate whether the local priest's prediction of rain will hold. The tavern keeper, a robust woman with sharp eyes, chimes in that her grandmother used to hang a turnip in the window to ward off lightning strikes. You smile. Lightning or not, it's a bold move for a root vegetable. Outside, the street vendors are packing up, and the city begins to quiet. But the turnip lore lives on, woven into everyday lives in ways both subtle and overt. From street charms to whispered warnings, the vegetable is a quiet weather oracle that everyone respects, even if just a little. You recall reading about the Colosseum's inaugural games under Emperor Titus, where the crowd's mood supposedly shifted with the weather, and perhaps the turnip's fate. Some ancient accounts mention gladiators carrying turnip tokens for luck, a curious detail often overlooked. Whether superstition or strategic psychology, it shows how deeply embedded the root was in Roman culture. Historians still debate if such tokens influenced morale or were just clever marketing. But you think it's charming to imagine a gladiator gripping a turnip charm before facing a lion. As the last lamp flickers, you wander toward a small garden tucked behind a villa. Moonlight spills silver on rows of vegetables, and there, among leafy greens, you spot a solitary turnip glowing faintly in the dark. It seems almost to pulse with life, a tiny beacon in the night. You crouch down and brush a finger over its smooth skin, feeling the coolness and the mystery entwined in something so ordinary. Sometimes, the simplest things hold the deepest secrets, and in this quiet moment, the turnip feels like a storyteller, whispering tales of ancient skies, earthy resilience, and the enduring human hope to know what tomorrow brings. The moon climbs higher as you leave the garden and trace your way toward the outskirts of the city, where the noise softens and the night feels thicker, almost like a blanket pulled tight over the earth. Here, the rhythm of the day gives way to the whisper of the wind and the distant calls of night birds. You pause to breathe deeply, tasting the cool, damp air that hints at the coming dawn. Out beyond the walls, the countryside spreads wide, fields stretching toward the horizon. Here, farmers tend to their crops by lantern light, their faces etched with lines of exhaustion and hope. For them, the turnip is not just an oracle but a companion, a living gauge of the land's mood and health. You watch a solitary figure kneeling by a patch of turnips, running his fingers through the soil, checking roots for signs of softness or rot. He mutters to himself about the changing sky, comparing the root's firmness to yesterday's clouds. This is practical weather lore in its purest form, born from necessity and observation. The man's knowledge, like that of many peasants, combines empirical insight with a touch of superstition. For example, he believes that a turnip that splits open suddenly signals an impending frost. This belief is surprisingly accurate, as frost can cause rapid water expansion inside the root, leading to cracking. Historians still debate how much of ancient Roman weather lore was scientifically grounded versus symbolic storytelling. Was it pragmatic knowledge dressed in ritual, or ritual disguised as practicality? You suspect the truth is a little of both, humanity's perennial dance between reason and wonder. Nearby, a shepherd leans on his staff, sharing a tale of a night when his turnips glowed faintly blue under the moonlight, a phenomenon some say foretold a hard winter. Scientists today speculate this might have been bioluminescent fungi or mold, But in those days, it was surely a sign from the gods. You smile at how even today, people interpret nature's quirks as messages. Turnips weren't unique in this regard, but their role was distinct, steady, unassuming, yet capable of carrying layers of meaning that shifted with context. As dawn creeps closer, you find yourself on a ridge overlooking a vast field, the soil dark and fertile beneath the pale sky. Rows of turnips stretch out like silent sentinels, waiting for the sun to coax them awake. You run your hand over one of the roots, imagining the generations of Romans who have done the same, farmers, philosophers, priests, soldiers, each hoping that this simple root could offer clarity amid the uncertainty of the weather. In that quiet moment, you understand that the turnip story is really about human connection. To the earth, to each other, and to the endless mystery of what tomorrow might bring. The sun is fully risen now, casting golden light over fields that shimmer with morning dew. You're back in the city, but it feels different, warmer, softer, less rushed. The bustle of Rome has settled into a gentle hum, like a lullaby played by the clatter of carts and distant chatter. You cradle the turnip in your palm, noticing how its cool surface contrasts with the warmth of the day. You find yourself near the baths, where Romans relax and gossip, their bodies steam-wrapped and content. Weather talk is always a part of conversation here, not just idle chatter but an essential thread weaving together health, mood, and daily plans. Someone mentions the odd swelling of their turnips in the garden, a symptom believed to precede heavy rains. The baths themselves were an ancient weather refuge. They retained warmth, humidity, and comfort while outside, the elements ruled. You imagine farmers and city dwellers alike finding solace here, their thoughts turning to the simple turnip and its subtle signs. One elderly woman at a pool's edge shares a tale of her youth, when her father swore by the turnip's skin texture to predict frost. If it felt rough, he'd cover the vines, she says, but if smooth, he'd let the frost come and prune the weak away. Her story, full of practical wisdom, blends into a larger tapestry of weather lore. Yet, not all tales are so straightforward. Some believed turnips could predict more than just weather. They were said to influence moods, inspire dreams, or even ward off evil spirits. A particularly quirky ritual involved rubbing turnip juice on the forehead to calm nerves before a public speech. Historians still argue whether such rituals were regional quirks or widespread beliefs. Some see them as remnants of older pagan practices, others as early folk medicine. Either way, the turnip's role straddled the line between science and superstition, practical use and poetic symbolism. Nearby, a group of children play a game involving turnip shapes, guessing the upcoming season based on the root's size and color. It's a playful echo of the serious agricultural predictions made by their ancestors. The game's lightheartedness doesn't diminish the turnip's cultural weight, it reinforces it. You ponder how a root so ordinary could carry such diverse meanings. It's a vegetable, yes, but also a cultural symbol, a weather gauge, a talisman, and a player in the grand Roman story. As you leave the baths, you catch sight of a statue carved with intricate details, a farmer holding a turnip, his face serene and knowing. It's a humble tribute, but one that speaks volumes about the reverence afforded to this simple root. Walking on, you realize that understanding the turnip's history means appreciating the layers of human experience it holds, the hopes, fears, rituals, and daily lives intertwined with the weather's ever-changing moods. By mid-morning, the city streets buzz with renewed energy, vendors set up shop, carts rattle over cobblestones, and the scent of freshly ground herbs fills the air. You drift toward a quieter part of town, a scholarly district where scrolls and books accumulate like the dust that settles on them. Here, the story of the turnip takes on a new hue, one of recorded knowledge, debates, and attempts at systematizing the natural world. You find yourself in a dimly lit library, its wooden shelves groaning under the weight of papyrus scrolls. Scholars clad in simple togas pore over texts that attempt to classify plants, link weather phenomena to celestial events, and decode the patterns of nature. The turnip, it seems, was a favorite example of agricultural wisdom and divination. You overhear a heated discussion. One scholar insists that the sap secretion of turnips is purely biological, an involuntary plant response, while another argues it must be read as a sign from the gods. The truth lies somewhere between, one mutters. But which side? The debate reminds you how early science and superstition often tangled in the ancient world. Interestingly, The Roman writer Pliny the Elder devoted sections of his encyclopedic works to root vegetables, including turnips, describing their cultivation, medicinal uses, and, yes, their reputed ability to predict weather. Pliny's writings were part observational, part hearsay, and part myth. His accounts helped preserve these beliefs for centuries, but also sowed seeds of skepticism. You notice marginalia, notes scribbled by later readers, questioning Pliny's claims about turnip sap and its correlation with rain. Some annotations suggest that the weather turnip might be more metaphor than fact, a symbol of human attempts to impose order on nature's chaos. This tension between belief and evidence underpins much of ancient knowledge. Historians still argue whether agricultural law was primarily pragmatic or performed ritualistically to foster community cohesion and psychological comfort. Away from the scrolls, you spot a small garden used by scholars for experiments. Turnips grow alongside herbs like sage and rosemary, their growth monitored and recorded. There are early attempts at cataloguing which turnips grew best under specific conditions, hinting at the precursors to modern botany. You pick up a fallen leaf, noticing the tiny patterns etched into its surface, reminders that even the smallest plant holds stories waiting to be read by those patient enough to learn its language. As you leave the library, the city hums around you, vibrant and alive with layers of knowledge, belief, and experience. The turnip's tale isn't just about weather, it's about humanity's endless quest to understand, classify, and find meaning in the world. The roots of this quest run as deep as those beneath the soil, twisting through time, mystery, and the quiet wisdom of the earth. The afternoon sun begins to wane, casting long shadows over the city's grand forums and quiet backstreets alike. You wander into a bustling herbarium, a place where knowledge and nature intertwine, and where the Romans' fascination with plants and their hidden powers thrives. This is where practical gardening meets the mystical, the liminal space where turnips live both as crops and as oracles. Among the shelves and pots, you overhear talk of the weather turnip once more, now framed by medicinal uses. The root's juice, it is said, could soothe fevers, and its leaves might calm digestion. But more intriguingly, the herbals mention signs in the turnip's texture and taste that could forecast the coming season's character. You learn that turnips growing tough and woody could mean an approaching drought, while sweet, tender roots promised a bountiful harvest ahead. Such knowledge was essential for farmers deciding when to plant or store food, but it also seeped into Roman superstitions and folk magic. An eccentric apothecary tells a tale of a peculiar batch of turnips that glowed faintly during a cloudy night, a phenomenon he attributes to divine intervention rather than mere mold or fungi. The gods speak in light sometimes, he says, and turnips are their lanterns. This fringe interpretation blends natural observation with spirituality, a hallmark of Roman life where science and religion often coexisted uneasily. You realize that the turnip's role in weather prediction isn't simply botanical, it's profoundly cultural, wrapped in rituals, prayers, and the lived realities of survival. Historians still debate how these beliefs influenced actual farming practices. Did farmers rely on turnip signs, or did they simply wish they could? Were these traditions mainly symbolic, or did they contain kernels of early empirical wisdom? The answer remains elusive, buried beneath layers of soil and story. You reflect on how modern science dismisses much of this lore, yet the human need to find meaning in natural patterns persists. In some ways, the turnip's tale is a mirror reflecting our own hope to read the future in the quiet language of the earth. You pocket a small, knobby root given to you by the apothecary, a tangible connection to centuries of knowledge, myth, and faith. As you step back into the cooling light, the city hums around you, full of stories waiting to be told. The turnip, you realize, is more than food. It's a storyteller, a weather prophet, a healer, and a silent witness to humanity's eternal dance with nature's mysteries. The light softens further, dusk settling like a gentle sigh across Rome's rooftops and winding streets. You find yourself drawn to a small, ancient temple on the city's edge, dedicated to the goddess Carmenta, a deity associated with prophecy and childbirth. Here, the turnip's mystical reputation comes to the fore in ways less tangible but equally compelling. Within the temple's quiet shadows, priests and priestesses chant softly, their voices weaving with the scent of burning herbs. They place turnips on the altar alongside other offerings, believing the root's form holds messages from the divine. Some say the shape of a turnip's leaves or the pattern of its skin can reveal the season's fate, or even the outcome of battles and political shifts. You recall reading about Roman augurs, those tasked with interpreting signs from nature, birds, and the heavens. While not officially turnip seers, their methods sometimes overlapped with agricultural omens. A cracked turnip might have been read alongside the flight of birds or the sound of thunder, a small piece in a vast cosmic puzzle. The intertwining of religion, superstition, and early science made for a complex cultural tapestry. The turnip's weather signals were part practical, part poetic, and wholly embedded in the spiritual life of the city. You watch as a young novice carefully examines a freshly harvested turnip, her eyes tracing the curves and crevices as if reading a sacred text. She murmurs a prayer for good weather, for fertile fields, and for peace. Historians still argue whether these practices were deeply rooted traditions or adaptations of older pagan rites trying to survive under evolving Roman beliefs. The turnip's role fluctuated, sometimes a humble root, sometimes a divine sign. As night deepens, you feel a calming hum of continuity, a thread connecting farmers, priests, soldiers, and city dwellers across centuries. The turnip isn't just a vegetable here, it's a symbol of hope, an emblem of the desire to know and control an unpredictable world. You leave the temple with a quiet reverence, the chants fading behind you like a distant melody. The city's heartbeat slows, and the turnip's story, rich and layered, feels more alive than ever, a gentle reminder that even the most mundane things can carry profound meaning. You tuck the root carefully into your pack, feeling its weight as a reminder that history is not just made in grand monuments but in the quiet soil beneath your feet. Night deepens fully now, and the city of Rome settles into a hushed stillness, punctuated only by the distant hoot of an owl or the soft rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. You walk slowly through the quiet streets, the turnip safely tucked away, its unassuming presence a steady anchor in the sea of history you've been swimming through. You think back on all you've learned, how this humble root played a starring role in the lives of ancient Romans, not merely as food, but as a trusted tool to peer into the unpredictable dance of weather and fate. From the muddy fields to the marble forums, from fishermen's lore to priestly rites, the turnip threaded its way through everyday life and ritual alike. There was the practical wisdom of farmers who read its texture and shape as nature's own forecast, and the fringe tales of glowing roots and mystical predictions. There were the scholarly debates captured in dusty scrolls, blending early scientific observation with the mysticism of gods and spirits. You recall the playful children's games, the protective charms, and the silent prayers whispered in the flickering light of temple altars. Historians still argue whether the turnip's weather role was mainly symbolic or genuinely practical, but you feel the answer isn't so clear-cut. It was a little bit of both, a symbol of human resilience and the eternal hope to know tomorrow, wrapped up in a humble root that grew quietly in the earth. As you pause on a bridge overlooking the Tiber, the city's lights reflecting softly on the water, you realize that the turnip story is really a story about connection, to the earth, to the cycles of nature, and to the shared human experience of uncertainty and hope. You breathe in the cool night air, the sounds of the city settling like a soft lullaby around you. The turnip in your satchel feels less like a mere vegetable and more like a storyteller, a silent, steadfast witness to centuries of life and lore. You take one last look at the shimmering river and whisper a thank you to the humble root that helped ancient Romans make sense of the skies, the soil, and the shifting whims of fate. And now, as your eyes grow heavy, you let yourself drift, carried gently on the currents of history, nature, and quiet wonder. The night stretches out like a soft, velvet blanket, and you feel yourself sinking into its calm embrace. The turnip's tale, with all its twists and turns, begins to fade gently, like a whispered secret between you and the earth. Remember, every root, every leaf, every shadow carries stories waiting to be heard, if only you listen softly enough. So rest now, knowing that the mysteries of weather and time are woven into the very soil beneath your feet, and that with each dawn, new stories will quietly grow. Sleep well.